Falun Dafa is amazing. I mean, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever come across. You know, I mean, health is superb. I haven't seen a doctor in 15 years or even taken an aspirin.
Worship breast cancer, but our bodies get better, and my soul is very, very good.
In just a few months, I completely changed. I quit alcohol, drugs, and all that lifestyle.
Practice of Falun Dafa makes me so happy and peaceful, and thinking about others first better than about myself.
Today in China, as you all know, Falun Gongs are persecuted, arrested, tortured, and killed.
The government launched a nationwide persecution to eradicate the traditional and peaceful spiritual practice of Falun Gong. This follows the principles of truth, compassion, tolerance.
The persecution of Falun Gong is one of the worst human rights abuses in the world. It is absolutely wrong. It must stop immediately.
Today, there are tens of thousands of Falun Gong practitioners have been imprisoned in China for their non-violent peaceful activities. Falun Gong practitioners never harmed anyone. They just did their own prayers or meditation on their own. That's the question we want to ask Chinese government. Why do you want to hurt and harm people who never hurt you or hurt anyone else?
There was a park across the street from my house. Because the first exercise site couldn't hold so many people anymore, it divided into the second, the third, the fourth. So at every street corner and in every park, you could see people practicing Falun Gong.
There was from different kind in society. It was many policemen and military.
It was just fundamental part of society at that time, and everybody knew somebody who practiced.
Falun Gong is a traditional practice of self-cultivation, a practice of slow-moving exercises, meditation, and studying of the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, and trying to adopt those into your life.
Falun Gong values are quite real, and they're quite attractive. They actually represent a whole side of China which has been completely suppressed for many years. It's a side of China that most Westerners never see.
For thousands of years, the Chinese people have believed in Buddhas and Taos and becoming an immortal. Falun Gong really dared to talk about these things, and immediately people took it to heart. Oh, the true ancient good things of China have come back.
Every 10 years or so, the party starts a persecution of a minority, and mainly, I think, to instill fear in the general population. Consider just 3 of the persecution campaigns that have gone on since 1950. The so-called Great Leap Forward, where an estimated 40 million people starved to death. The Cultural Revolution, which you all know, I'm sure, of 1966 to 76, saw perhaps another 2 million killed. The Tiananmen Square massacre of 1989, where soldiers killed thousands of people who were seeking openness and democracy.
Since I was 11, I experienced all of the Chinese Communist Party's campaigns. Group after group of good people were targeted. There was no faith, no truth. Falun Gong stood in stark contrast with communist ideology. and so it would be very hard for it to be tolerated by the CCP.
The government decided to frame Falun Gong as an enemy. Some of the most obvious ones are that it had become already larger than the Chinese Communist Party in terms of its membership. Those sorts of issues. And I think those are true. And I think from a Marxist perspective, seeing the spread of Falun Gong through the different class levels and occupations, rural, urban, and all the way up to the Chinese Communist Party itself was terrifying. This is the way Marxism is supposed to spread, not Falun Gong.
Jiang Zemin issued order, set up special office called 610 Office, in charge of nationwide campaign persecution.
People were disappearing. I couldn't find my friends. One day there were 30 of us in the park, and the next day they're gone, and in the middle of the park, tacked on the tree, was a government declaration that this has been outlawed.
First time I heard about the persecution, I didn't believe it at the first. And when I heard my mom was into labor camp, I was very worried. And later on, my sister was put in the labor camp, my younger brother was put into jail. Basically, my family is just torn apart. When this family is torn apart, actually, I feel inside torn apart.
Common criminals, rapists, murderers, thieves, drug addicts were at the top of the pyramid. They were given control of the labor camp in a sense. Underneath the guards, they were given control, and they always had high status. At the same time, Falun Gong has a code of nonviolence, a code of passive resistance. And this made them very vulnerable to the conditions inside their individual cell blocks.
I often hear the sounds of electric batons, and frequently in the middle of the night. I hear heart-wrenching screams from practitioners. She took the electric baton. When she was beating me, it felt like it was directly piercing through my heart. It was like my entire body started convulsing, like it was going to fall apart.
The purpose of the torture is to extract false confessions from them, linking Falun Gong to violent activity, anti-China activity, criminal activity, in order to justify their persecution. You needed the propaganda in order to sell the persecution to the Chinese people. It's about selling the persecution both to the people in China and to the outside world.
Essentially, it's a process of demonizing and dehumanizing, incessant propaganda.
It may say, Falun Gong says, well, we're not political. Well, no, it's not. But the point is, everything in China must be subordinate to the political in the Chinese Communist Party's mind. It must be either harmless and innocent and frivolous, or it must be, if it is to have any seriousness, then it must be subordinate.
We've actually had a case in the courts in Canada where it was ruled that Falun Gong is not a cult. And if you look at, as you said, all the indicia of cults, it is not one. And it's simply a part of this demonization that goes on. It's an easy term to throw out. David and I have met Falun Gong practitioners in probably 50 countries.
Or even more, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. All walks of life, all ages, all backgrounds, all education. I've found them to be a wonderful group of people.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with any of that. I mean, Falun Gong, first of all, it's not even an organization because it's a set of exercises with a spiritual foundation. Yeah. Everything's on the internet. You don't pay anything. You don't sign up to anything. You can start whenever you want. You can stop with it whenever you want. You don't even have to tell anybody you're doing it. You can. Their principles are very simple and ethical, and I mean, all of that is true. I think part of the problem we're faced with is that accepting Falun Gong for what it is means accepting the persecution for what it is. People are hesitant to admit that for a number of different reasons. I mean, it impacts their interaction, the economics, and it's just the horror of what's happening. If you look what's happening in China with the Catholic Church, the Communist Party appoints bishop, and with the Buddhism, they've got their own Panchen Lama, and Islam, they have their own imams, but they can't do that with Falun Gong. And because they can't control them by appointing somebody who is the head of Falun Gong, the persecution is the only way out, which is to a certain extent explains the persecution, but also explains their strength, because the Falun Gong cannot be destroyed in that way by appointing somebody the communists decide to appoint as their head, because there is no head. We've been asked to investigate allegations that there has been harvesting of organs of Falun Gong in China. Our bottom line conclusion, after considering everything as best we could, was that the allegations are true.
In China, organ harvesting has become basically a booming business. For kidney and liver, the waiting time in Europe is several years. In China is 1 to 4 weeks. This shows that China has a huge bank of living people from whom organs can be removed at any time.
It uses this massive prisoner population, particularly Falun Gong, as a source for organs. It represents a level of medical corruption that we have not seen since the Holocaust.
The government in China is doing a terrible thing, which is comparable to what the Nazis did.
This is a crime against humanity. We should do our best to identify those specific individuals who are engaged in this and put them on the list of people who deserve to be brought to justice.
It is the European Parliament's obligation to condemn decisively the actions of the Chinese government.
We ask the Chinese authorities to stop it immediately.
All prisoners of conscience in China, including Falun Gong practitioners, should be released immediately.
Falun Gong has been exemplary in its response. It has never dealt with violence in a violent way. It's always responded with forbearance, with love, with truth, with patience, and ultimately that's going to prevail.